Be sure to catch Internet Mysteries weekdays on RatedEm.
Previously, we've taken a look at forgotten Xbox franchises and forgotten PlayStation franchises, but today, we're taking a look at the forgotten franchises of one of the gaming industry's biggest companies, Nintendo. I would say that Nintendo and PlayStation are both really bad when it comes to leaving behind franchises that have dedicated fan bases. Xbox seems to have recognized what their biggest franchises are and has made efforts to keep them alive. Nintendo has a multitude of franchises that some would consider core pillars of their catalog, yet they refuse to create new entries for them. In today's episode of So What Happened To, we're taking a look at these forgotten franchises and finding out why they haven't been revived. Mario Kart was for everyone, but F-Zero was for the real racists. Wait, what's that? That's not what racing fans are called. Oh, shit, my bad. F-Zero was a more fast-paced, intense racing game centered around a futuristic racing tournament. While Mario Kart focused more on casual fun with a slower pace and the inclusion of items to level out the playing field, F-Zero was all about racing skill and being faster than your opponents. Most people know of its existence from one of the game's characters, Captain Falcon, being included in Super Smash Bros., but before that, F-Zero was really big on the Super Nintendo, and later games in the franchise are still very good and fun to play. From my research, F-Zero was actually the inspiration for Daytona USA and the Wipeout series. I can't stress how important F-Zero was to Nintendo at one point. As I mentioned, F-Zero started on the Super Nintendo, with the next worldwide release on the 64 with F-Zero X. F-Zero Maximum Velocity released on the GBA in 2001, with F-Zero GX following that on the GameCube in 2003. There's also F-Zero AX, an arcade machine version of F-Zero GX, released in the same year as the console game. Another GBA game would be released titled GP Legend in 2003, and after that, the series would lay dormant for many years. F-Zero was brought back in 2023, but it was a small battle royale game based on the SNES original that was only accessible to Nintendo Switch Online members, titled F-Zero 99. This is not what fans of the series were looking for. So why hasn't Nintendo released a new modern F-Zero game? Why did it take 20 years to get a half-assed, membership-exclusive, trend-following game? Well, Nintendo did try to make a modern F-Zero game, but there were complications. They actually approached Criterion Games to develop a modern F-Zero game for the launch of the at-the-time unrevealed Wii U. However, Criterion couldn't commit to the project as they were knee-deep in Need for Speed Most Wanted. After that, Nintendo decided that if they were to make a new F-Zero game, it would have to release on a platform that would allow them to bring innovation to the series. They didn't just want to make a new F-Zero, they wanted to make an F-Zero that was different from the rest. I guess F-Zero 99 fits that description, but I'm sure fans were wanting something else that fits that description. Something that isn't a membership-exclusive 16-bit battle royale. Kid Icarus is one of Nintendo's more obscure franchises as it only has 3 total games. Similarly to F-Zero, most people nowadays know of the series' existence through Super Smash Bros., where the game's main character, Pit, is a playable fighter. Not so similarly to F-Zero, Kid Icarus was not anything worth writing home about back in the day. Released originally on the NES, Kid Icarus was an action platformer starring not Icarus himself, but an angel named Pit. Players climb upwards on the screen and defeat monsters along the way. Following that was Kid Icarus of Myths and Monsters for the Game Boy in 1991, which improved upon the gameplay of the original thanks to the Game Boy's hardware. The series wouldn't see a new release for a while, but in the meantime, Pit was added as a playable character into Super Smash Bros. Brawl for the Nintendo Wii. It wouldn't be until 2012 where Kid Icarus Uprising was released for the 3DS, shaking up the gameplay by being a third-person rail shooter. I always wanted to play this one as a kid, but I never got to, but I hope to play it sometime soon now that I'm an adult with adult money. Fun fact, actually, Of Myths and Monsters wasn't available in Japan until it was made available as a virtual console release 1 month before Kid Icarus Uprising released on the 3DS. Since Uprising, there has not been a new Kid Icarus game, and Uprising's director, Masahiro Sakurai, has confirmed that a new Kid Icarus game likely isn't happening anytime soon. After Uprising, Sakurai directed Smash 4, and then after that was Smash Ultimate, and most recently he directed Kirby Air Riders. So mainly, Sakurai Sakurai has been busy with other projects and hasn't really had time to dedicate himself to Kid Icarus. On top of that, the team that developed Kid Icarus Uprising, Sora Limited, does not have the same team that it once had. From my research, it's now just Sakurai and his wife. There was a plan to revive Kid Icarus on the Wii long before Uprising, which would have been developed by Factor 5, the devs behind the Star Wars Rogue Squadron games. However, due to creative differences between Factor 5 and Nintendo, this project never got past a pitch. Punch-Out is one of early Nintendo's most iconic franchises, starting out in the arcades in the 80s with the first Punch-Out, and followed by Super Punch-Out shortly after. The original game would be released on the NES under the title Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which featured the real-world boxer as an opponent. After that was a sequel, also titled Super Punch-Out on the Super Nintendo, which was the final game in the series for a while. But then in 2009, Nintendo would reboot the series with Punch-Out for the Wii. It utilized the Wiimote and Nunchuck to emulate fighting your opponent, but it retained the cartoony, arcade-style gameplay that the original games had. Aside from a Club Nintendo exclusive WiiWare prequel game called Doc Lewis's Punch-Out, there has not been a new Punch-Out since 2009's reboot. A lot of fans think the series won't see a new entry due to the series' use of stereotypes to design its opponent characters, but in reality, Nintendo doesn't want to make a new Punch-Out due to not being able to differentiate it from past games. It's similar to F-Zero mentioned earlier, where Nintendo wants to utilize a new mechanic to rejuvenate the simplistic gameplay, and that mechanic hasn't dropped yet. Even if they were to make a new one for the Switch, they would either make it button-based like the original games or motion-based like the Wii reboot. The only difference would be the graphics. This might not really be a franchise, but it was something Nintendo was doing a few years back that they haven't done in a while. Back in 2016, Nintendo released the NES Classic Edition, a miniature version of the NES that came preloaded with 30 games from the console's history. It sold pretty well, as it provided a way for casual fans to experience these old games in a new era, and for more diehard fans, it was a cool collectible. The following year, the SNES Classic would release, which was the same as the NES Classic Edition, but featured an entirely new game, Star Fox 2, an unreleased sequel to the SNES original. Many other companies followed suit. I remember owning a Genesis Classic console, and I remember there being a PS1 Classic. After 2019, this trend of mini classic consoles died out hard and fast. The first two from Nintendo were fine, but the market got a little oversaturated when other companies got in on the hype. Nintendo stopped with the SNES Classic and has since opted for putting their older games on the Switch, playable through the Nintendo Switch Online emulators. It is a bit easier to have these games accessible through a membership on the modern console, but I still think it would have been cool to see a mini N64 or a mini GameCube.
Need a new form of entertainment in your life? Join the thousands of others who have hit the subscribe button. Side effects of subscribing may include joy, laughter, and newfound knowledge about video games. Talk to your doctor about if subscribing is right for you.
Want to support the channel? Be sure to share this video with your friends. Rated M episodes are made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Chibi Robo was a game released on the GameCube following a robot whose purpose is to complete various tasks to improve the happiness of a family. Odd premise, I know. But Chibi Robo does have a big cult following alongside other obscure games like Katamari Damacy. As mentioned, the first game released on the GameCube with its simple, family-friendly gameplay. Following that was Chibi Robo Park Patrol on the DS, which centered around maintaining a park. On the 3DS was Chibi Robo Photo Finder, which utilized the console's camera for its gameplay. Also released on the 3DS is the notorious Chibi Robo Ziplash, a combat-focused action platformer that did not resemble the original game's charm at all. Ziplash was panned by fans and critics, and ever since, Nintendo has pulled the plug on Chibi Robo. Star Fox was a space-themed rail shooter series centered around an anthropomorphic animal military crew. The first game released on the SNES and grew massive interest due to its graphics. Utilizing a special processor called the Super Effects chip, it allowed the NES to display very rudimentary 3D graphics, creating a look like no other game on the console. Its sequel, Star Fox 64, was also received positively and was the first game on the console with Rumble Pack support, keeping in line with the series pushing for the utilization of new technology in gaming. The series would deviate on the GameCube with Star Fox Adventures, an action-adventure game similar to the Legend of Zelda series. Star Fox Adventures is a bit of a weird one, as it was actually supposed to be an entirely separate game called Dinosaur Planet, but Nintendo didn't think it would sell, so they converted it into a Star Fox game. Unfortunately, the swap wouldn't do the game much justice. fans didn't inherently enjoy the change in gameplay from rail shooter to action adventure. The day after Star Fox Adventures released, the developers, Rare, would be acquired by Microsoft. It was their last game on a Nintendo home console and their only game on the GameCube. Star Fox did return to its traditional gameplay in Star Fox Assault, also on the GameCube, but it was just fine enough. It didn't really do much different from previous games, and the new additions such as the on-foot sections weren't inherently engaging. 2016's Star Fox Zero would be the next home console release, finding a home on the Wii U and utilizing its gamepad. Although it kept in line with utilizing new gaming hardware, fans and critics felt that this game also didn't do much different from previous games. As I mentioned earlier, the SNES Classic Edition came bundled with the never-before-released Star Fox 2, but this wasn't enough to satisfy fans. Since then, the series hasn't seen a new entry, and will likely stay that way until Nintendo has a new piece of technology that they can utilize to make the game unique. Nintendogs was big on the DS, being a pet simulation game where players would raise a dog of their choice and interact with their pet using the DS's touchscreen. Players could pet their dog, throw frisbees, play toys with their animal, give them a wash, all to maintain the dog's needs. Players could also use the DS's microphone to tell them to do a trick or call them over by name. Nintendogs had many releases and many re-releases featuring new dog breeds, and then when the 3DS rolled around, the series received a new entry specific to that console called Nintendogs Plus Cats, which introduced cats to the game alongside new gameplay features only possible with the new hardware. Since then, Nintendogs hasn't seen a new game. While there doesn't seem to be a definitive reason as to why the series hasn't seen a new game, my guess is that it's due to the decline in life simulation games. Games like The Sims, Cooking Mama, and Style Savvy were all the rage in the late 2000s, but the trend has largely died out since then. Because of that, it's likely why we haven't seen a new Nintendogs game, or any new games in those series I just mentioned. Pilotwings was a flight simulation series originally starting out on the SNES. It achieved 3D without the use of the Super FX chip, but it wasn't inherently real 3D and more just a clever illusion. The player progresses through multiple different missions, requiring them to fly various vehicles to earn certificates. After the SNES release, a sequel was made for the Nintendo 64 as a launch title. It followed a very similar gameplay loop, but also let the player explore the open areas freely. Pilotwings wouldn't receive a new entry until Pilotwings Resort on the 3DS. This game had the biggest emphasis on open exploration, but did offer a mission mode that had set objectives. Pilotwings Resort would shift the series to fall in line with games like Wii Sports and Wii Fit, as the game was centered around the main location for Wii Sports Resort, Woohoo Island. The pilots of the previous games were also replaced with the inclusion of the Mii characters. Since then, we have yet to see a new Pilotwings game. From what I gathered, Nintendo just doesn't really see it as a priority, and seeing as how it's always been released as a launch title, we'll likely have to wait for Nintendo's next console to see a new entry. In between the release of 64 and Resort, Factor 5 also did present a pitch for a GameCube iteration of the game, which was then pushed to the Wii, and then ultimately scrapped when Nintendo felt unconfident in the project. It's possible the Kid Icarus drama we talked about earlier played a part in Factor 5 and Nintendo going separate ways. So that was a few of Nintendo's forgotten franchises. If you haven't seen the previous two videos in this style, be sure to check them out. I've got one more video like this planned, and I'm sure in the future I could try and find more companies with more forgotten franchises or revisit some of the ones I've already covered.